Imagine a young kid looking down at his waist through a little square cube of glass and discovering that that could be his ticket to anywhere in the world. That's then when I learned about Ansel Adams. And his inspiration to me was being able to capture the magnificent beauty that is in this world today. And it was at that moment that I realized that I had essentially a travel machine that would take me anywhere in the world. And it started when I was about 6 or 7 years old. And it's brought me to this place today, where I look forward to sharing with everybody about listening, healing, forgiving, and the environment. And before I get to that point, there's another exercise that I'd like us all to do, and that's going to involve Kendall. Kendall is my partner, my spouse, and the person that enjoys less than 200 square feet of space inside a silver tin can as we drive around the country. So with that, I'd like to welcome Kendall to come up and lead us in this next exercise, please.
Hi, everybody, and nice to meet each and every one of you. And I just want to for a moment thank you more than anything. Thank you for sharing this amazing human with me, because I know at first it was hard to when Chris and I first met. It was a little bit hard to everywhere we went around town. It was, hey Chris, hi Chris, hey Chris Clark, hey Clark, what's up? And I thought, wow, he really knows a lot of people. He's like a movie star around here. And I know it was a little hard at first to let him leave Fenwick in this area. And so I just want to thank you. Thank you for encouraging him and encouraging his journey as he shares his beautiful art and creativity and contributions with all of us in the rest of the world. And he asked me today to just lead us in a connection exercise, and one that could create trust in the room and safety in the room. And because safety and trust are critical for healing. And so if you would, I would love for you to all stand up again, now that you've all gotten comfortable. And just think about what creates trust for you. What creates healing for you? And when I left for college, I remember my father said, just don't forget, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna really think about that one. And what I learned is that although so many people say it takes decades to build trust, what I have found is that actually trust can be created in an instant by where we're coming from. And that if we can see just for a moment that trust can come through our eyes, that if we can offer our eyes as a place to offer trust, a message to those we greet that say, I've got you, I see you, that can create something in an instant that could even transcend years and years and years of knowing someone and building that. So if you're all willing to just trust me for a minute that could be true, I'd love for you to make eye contact with someone you don't know and partner up. And what might become apparent is the realization of how almost every human interaction is dominated by words. But connection can happen in a moment of silence, of sharing space, of seeing someone maybe for the very first time in a new way. And with that, we'll take a deep inhale breath together and let it out. And we're done.
Next up, truth through storytelling. And I'd like to introduce Ragghi Rain.
Any day Katakita Wakanan is spoken is a good day for Indigenous people. We Kanawash Nitap. Sio Yano. So let us begin with this story from so long ago. Long ago, but not so long that we have forgotten, there was a chief. And this chief was wicked and demanded whatever his desire was to be done. And if you chose not to listen, you would be punished, or perhaps you would die. So everyone in that village lived in constant fear, except for the wise old one, Kikai. She was an elder, and she was never afraid to speak the truth. But their village was located next to a huge marsh that were filled with all kinds of amphibians. And it was good. Every night when dusk came and all of the villagers had finished their work, they would begin to hear the songs of the chorus frogs. And they would go inside and they would lay on their sleeping mats, and the songs of the chorus frogs would lull them to sleep, and they would have good dreams. And it was the best moment of the day. But one night, I don't know what happened, the chief was having a terrible nightmare. And he turned this way and that way, and his heart pumped and sweat came, and he woke up and he looked around and he rubbed his eyes, but the nightmare was all around him. He tried to push it away, but he could not. So he laid back down on his sleeping mat and he tried to go back, but still the chorus frog sang, "Gerbit, gerbit," but it didn't lull him to sleep. Instead, it began to make him aggravated. He was so angry that he couldn't sleep because of their foolish song. So he did what every impertinent person does. He stood up. He opened the flaps of his lodge. He looked out and he said, "I demand you stop croaking." "Do what?" The frogs looked at one another. They rolled their eyes. And they thought, we don't take orders from humans, especially such a rude one. Let's show them what we got, boys. And with that, they started singing louder than before. And he grew so angry. He stood out there as the all-powerful chief he was. And he said, "I demand you stop croaking. And if you do not, I seek revenge. Revenge on you. And I will have you put to death." I mean, the frogs were really scared. They were laughing to themselves and they kept on singing. And in the morning, he stood in the middle of the village and he said, "Come, come." And everyone came quickly and they sat in front of him. And he said, "Last night, the frogs disobeyed me. I told them not to croak, and they did. So today, each one of you will grab your sticks and your clubs. You will go to the marsh, and you will kill every single one of them. Now, all of the people began to look at one another, and they started to share words. And he knew this was dangerous. And so he grabbed a child, and he held the child. He said, if I hear the sound of one frog, I will make this child suffer. And they knew he spoke the truth. And they grabbed their sticks and their clubs, and they headed to the marsh. And they did what they were told to do. But they knew they were wrong. They were wrong. But in the village, he walked proudly because he was so powerful. But also Kikai was there, an elder. Because you are so old and slow, you do not have to go. And because you are so foolish in your demands, I speak the truth. What is the truth? All things are connected. What do you mean by that? Oh, you will see very soon. I promise you. And he stormed off. That night, all the people of the village came back, dragging their clubs and their sticks, covered with the blood of the innocent ones. They spoke no words, and they went in, and they lay down on their sleeping mats, but they could not sleep, for dusk came, and there was silence. And when they shut their eyes, all they seen was what they had done to the ones that had given them so much. Day after day, this is the way it was, until one night, when they go to lay down, they heard a new sound coming towards the village, and it engulfed the whole village. And they began to feast on the people. And they slapped and hit and did everything they could. But there were too many. And in the lodge of the chief, they began to feast on him. And he raged. And he told them, get out, I'll seek revenge. And they did what the frogs do. And they feasted more. And in the morning, he stood in the middle of the village. He was covered with red, itchy welts, as were the people. And he said, come, come. They came. Get your sticks, your clubs, go kill those mosquitoes. And they didn't argue, they just headed off. And the wise one stood there and looked at him and said, all things are connected. And he stormed off. That evening they came back and they said, do not be angry with us. Please forgive us. We couldn't kill him, but we'll go tomorrow and we'll go the next day. We'll go until it is done. Please do not hurt anyone. We will keep going. He was so angry, he went into his lodge. He fastened it tight, fastened the bottom to protect himself. He only protects himself. And that moment, the wise one stood. And she said, shh, listen to me. Gather only what you need, only what you can carry, and quietly follow me. And they did what they were told, and they followed her, and the animals followed, and they walked, and they walked, and they walked, until they were away. And that night at dusk, They came. They went into the lodges, and the lodges were empty, for the meal had walked away. But they went to the chiefs, and they lifted it up and threw it to the side, and they covered him. And the last thing he heard was, all things are connected. All things are connected. We know this to be true, do we not? When we think of when man steps in and thinks he knows what is best, he brings harm. I know my Indigenous brothers from Hawaii talk about a time that their parents said the skies were filled with tropical, beautiful birds until the plantation owners came. And they wanted to get rid of the rats because it ate their crops. So they brought in the mongoose. The mongoose didn't chase the rats away. They ate the eggs of the birds. In Puerto Rico, they did the same thing. And the birds are in danger. Species are lost. All things are connected. Kikai, the elder, spoke the truth. But if you listen to Aki, the Mother Earth, she has put it where it was meant to be. She has not asked us to move it. We have to listen to our elders. And that is that.
This used to be Seal Island, and it's disappeared. We used to use it for a launching spot for sailing in the Little Assawamin Bay. And it disappeared for a couple of reasons. The first of which are the beautiful snow geese who have been displaced from some of their natural feeding grounds due to the types of agriculture that we use. The second way they've been displaced, well, they also, when they eat their grasses for their meals, they don't just eat the top of the grass. The beak allows them to grab it and pull it out by the roots. And when they do that within 2 years, the soil is lost so that nothing will grow there again. Climate and elevated waters also have contributed to this disappearing. All things are connected. There have been many different names for this island, just a little west of what was Seal Island. It's a rookery, and I looked at it the other day, and it's disappearing. The trees are going away, but it's one of the last bastions around here where you can, in the springtime, right around now, watch the sunrise, and you can be on the opposite side, and you can see the green herons, the blue herons, the egrets, mallards, all launching off from there. They're connected. This was an evening photo. And the wetlands. As we look around here, I always wondered why we had all these small rivulets coming out of the wetlands. It was because of the mosquitoes. We wanted to get the water out of the wetlands as quickly as possible so we wouldn't suffer from mosquitoes. At least the planes have stopped flying overhead, dumping the chemicals on them and us. But while we drain wetlands, there's other places in the world, New York City, for example, where they're now rebuilding the wetlands since Hurricane Sandy. They're putting them on the exteriors of their bulkheading. They're planting oysters up and down the Hudson River. You used to not be able to walk in this bay because the oysters were so sharp, and they covered the entire floor of all of our inland bays. Thanks to the good work at the Center for the Inland Bays and other agencies, there's been an oyster restoration program that has begun, and there are aquaculture and farmers taking place. So we know that all things are connected, and we have the ability to do this. We must make sure that we support each other and that we stay connected so that the people that help make decisions know what we believe in. With that, I'd like to introduce Lisa Swanger, Education and Outreach with the Center for the Inland Bays.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Chris Clark and your beautiful partner for bringing us all together. I'm very honored to be here and really excited to see where these discussions go moving forward. As Chris mentioned, my name is Lisa Swanger. I'm the Outreach and Education Director at the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. For those of you who are not familiar with this center, we are a private nonprofit organization, and we're one of 28 national estuary programs in the country. And we're committed to protecting, preserving, and restoring Delaware's inland bays and their watershed. Our watershed as a whole is about 320 square miles. And all that water across that landscape drains to our inland bays. And so this watershed is really important, thinking about connectivity, and everyone's linked. Connection with watersheds is really crucial. We need to think about how we are all inextricably linked through the water. So what we do in one area of our watershed can impact everything and everyone in the other parts of that watershed. So that's a big part, actually, that I want people to take away with watersheds is connection to our land, to each other, to the water. There's many beautiful habitats within our watershed, from maritime forests to saltwater marshes, freshwater wetlands and meadows, and everything in between. And of course, as the name suggests, we've got the inland bays. We can't forget those. So we've got Indian River, Rehoboth, and Little Assawoman Bays. And these are three interconnected shallow bodies of water. Together they make up an estuary system. An estuary being just this most fantastic interface between our land and our oceans. And I think it wouldn't be fair if I did not note the intrinsic value that the inland bays in the area has to provide, which has brought us all here today in one way or another. So the inland bays, being an estuary, provide many ecosystem services or values. The first of being environmental. So environmental value of providing habitat for so many species that from the fan favorites of the blue crab, right? Or we've got lots of fish, if anyone loves to go fishing. Over 100 species of finfish in our bays. Shorebirds, migratory birds, rest and refuel here. Horseshoe crabs breed here, they spawn. Lots of species use this as the area, the protective waters, to reproduce. So it's no wonder that estuaries as a whole are nicknamed nurseries of the sea, because they're so important for the species, not just that stay in the estuaries, but also that move on, maybe whether it's upstream or go out to the ocean. Right now, we're getting ready for diamondback terrapin nesting season, so you might see terrapins unfortunately needing to cross roadways in search of suitable nesting habitat. You also see me right behind them dodging traffic to save them. It's actually what inspired me to get into this field as a little girl, for better or for worse. I already got yelled at by my colleague that I better not do that this season. But so habitat's one thing, But being in this interface between land and ocean, estuaries serve as a very valuable buffer. So they are filtering pollutants coming across our landscape. They are absorbing floodwaters from upstream while also helping to dissipate storm surge coming off of the ocean. And even if you don't live right by the water, again, going back to that watershed approach, we're all going to be impacted by this. So those are just a few of the environmental benefits that this system provides to us and everything that lives here. But economic values, right? Our commercial industries, fisheries, tourism, etc. We all depend on a healthy, functioning system to support and sustain ourselves and our families. We have a right to that. Also, you can't forget about the cultural and social values that the estuary system provides, from the physical, the mental well-being, the health benefits. It allows us to have a sense of place, maybe even a sense of self. How do we identify with this area? And this is just considering time, not to take over, but these is just the broad, values that I wanted to note here today. Talk about grounding is appreciating and acknowledging these values and why I'm so passionate about it. So when thinking about these benefits, it's no wonder that people are moving here, people are staying to live here, and take appreciation for these values, both from the landscape and the waterscape. Unfortunately, with this growth comes negative impacts on the very thing that we love and need to survive. So the main threats to the bays and the surrounding area, we've got excess nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen that are polluting our waters. We've got habitat loss. And of course, we cannot forget about mentioning climate change and associated sea level rise. So those are the big three, I'll say, for the threats. And while there has been tremendous work done to improve the area, there's still a lot of work to be done. And that's where we come in. If we're going to make an effective change, we have to do it together. So that's why I'm so excited to be here and really acknowledge that the center is committed to improving our efforts for including everyone in the watershed. And I think even in the time that I've been here at the center, which has been 2 years through the pandemic, which has been fun, I've really seen an increase in that and enhance our efforts. I've been proud to not just be a part of it, but lead those discussions and those efforts. And we're growing in capacity to be able to devote more to that. And I'm very excited to see where this is going. Like Chris, you mentioned, I think step one for us to effectively, but also genuinely engage with people in a meaningful way that benefits the collective is to listen. Step one, listen to better understand. And that's why I'm here today. I want to listen. I want to learn. And I'm very interested to hear from all of you and learn your experiences, your perspectives, your knowledge, because that's how we all engage and we share. We've done some efforts, especially in this past year, as things got a little better with the pandemic and we could engage a little bit more. But again, there's much work to be done. So with that, I'll leave it here in that I would love to speak with you. I'll stay afterwards. Love to engage and connect. And a little nugget that I'll leave before I stop talking. I will never forget, I was at an international conference focused on marine debris. So all the trash in our oceans. It's a big passion of mine. Talking again about that connectivity, that flow of where it's coming from the source to the sink or our oceans, and those impacts that we are all collectively facing, some more than others, are being threatened more than other ways around the world. One of the speakers said something so simple yet powerful. It really resonated and stuck with me. He said how he approaches the ocean in his country is the same way he approaches a date. He shows up at his best, right? So you shower, hopefully. You put on your favorite clothes, whatever that looks like, and you represent your best self for that other person.
Thank you, Lisa. I like that. I like the message. And the message for me, and this is even on my homepage, is finding alignment in between the masculine and the feminine. And the feminine for me is the representation of Mother Earth. And when I think of Mother Earth, it's like going on a date. How do I show up? How do I show up today for you all here? How do I show up for Kendall in our relationship? How do I show up for myself so that I can bring that to the planet? With that, I'd like to bring Ragghi back up again.
Growing up traditional is like one of the coolest things. And sometimes it's so hard because I watch children beginning not to grow up with those traditions. But our stories is a way of teaching. It is how we teach. We tell the stories. And once somebody said to me, oh, it's nice, but what about the history? I'm like, they're in the stories. Listen to the stories, and you'll hear the way of our people. And we needed to teach these lessons. So this is a very important one. So I'm going to ask everyone to breathe with me. Plant and animal live together in a place all of their own. Oh, plant would take and press her roots deep into the moist Aki earth, and then thrust her stems up into the warm air, and soon branches would begin to grow, and leaves would bloom, and then fruit, the most glorious fruit you have ever seen. And then animal would come, he would eat the fruit, and plant did not mind. You see, she birthed the fruit and gave it to the animal and to each and every one of us freely. And they lived there together for some time, and it was good. But one day, you're not going to believe this, animal woke up. He started thinking on his own. I can't believe this. This is ridiculous. I am animal. I am superior to plant. Plant, doesn't show me the proper respect. She thinks she's equal to me. As all of you can agree with me, that's ridiculous, right? She's not my equal. I want you to think about it and think hard. I, animal, am strong. I am active. Plant. She's weak and passive. Just stands there. I, animal, can move about. Plant, stuck in one place. So surely you agree with me. I am the natural ruler of this land, right? And so you agree. I'm going to take this opportunity to talk to Plant right now. Plant, I am the natural ruler. I am superior to you. All you do is stay in one place. I am amazing. I can do many things. And you stand there. And so from henceforth, I want you to do this whenever I approach you. I want you to acknowledge my superiority. I want you to bow down, spread your branches on Aki, the earth, to show me honor. Now, Plant doesn't like to quarrel. And she doesn't really care if Animal thinks he's in charge or not. But if Animal thinks that she is going to bow down, spread her branches, that's unnatural. She can't do that. It's quite impossible. Only a strong wind could blow her kind of down. But that animal is not a strong wind. He's a bunch of hot air. So Plant does what plants do. She pushed her roots deeper into Aki. And she thrust off more stems. And the branches began to grow. An animal looked over and thought to himself, oh, she's gonna pay for this. She disobeyed me. I'm gonna teach her a lesson, that foolish Plant. And he was filled with rage, and he showed his teeth, and he flexed his claws, and he let out a hideous scream. And then he leapt upon the Plant, and he chewed and bit and scratched and pulled and broke every piece of that Plant until it was just a pile of rubble laying on the ground. He said, Uncle, I did it. I'm in power. Ooh, ooh, watch me. I'm the best. Ooh, ooh. You're nothing. I got it going. And that's how Plant went all day, running around, screaming how he was the greatest, the most powerful, had dominion over Aki, the earth. That night when he went to sleep, he had good dreams about him and his power. The next morning he woke up, he was still like dancing around, screaming, I'm in charge, I'm the best, I rule. But all of a sudden he had this pain in his stomach. And he said, woo, it's time to get me something to eat. And he headed over to Plant. And he looked, and she was just a pile of rubble. And he thought, oh, surely there's something else to eat in this place. And he ran from place to place, but there was nothing. And he ran back, and he tore it apart, and he was looking for a morsel. And there was nothing. Nothing left. Not one shred of food for him. And he sat down on his haunches, and he said, I have been so foolish. I have been so proud that I have made a grave mistake. I have ruined what kept me alive. What can I do, Plant? And he pushed around, but Plant was gone. And he laid down and he started to weep and wail. And the tears flowed from his face, and they touched Aki, and they floated all the way down to the roots. And when the roots felt the tears, They knew what to do. They began to grow, and they thrust up the stems, and the branches grew, and the leaves came, and it happened quickly, but not quick enough. For an animal was skin and bones. He was emaciated. He was dying. And plant had fruit, but he could not lift one paw up. He could not lift himself up. And he knew that he was finished. But plant worked herself down, and she bent her branch to place the fruit into his jaws. And he ate, and as he ate, life began to move through his body once again. And when animal could sit, he thought about one thing. He thought about how he can only destroy. He could only take away life. There are others that give life. He thought about how plant did not hold against him what he had done to her, but she gave freely, just like all the plants do for each of us. When I grew up and just young, our elders taught us something so simple. They said, Aki, the Earth Mother gives us everything we want. Can we agree? She gives us fresh nip water. She gives us food, nourishment. She gives us shelter. She gives us clothes. And she asks for us to respect her and care for her. And that the thing that we forget is we need all of that stuff, don't we, to stay alive? Yes? Do you truly believe that she needs you and I? Our elders told us one day she will grow tired of us, and she will shake so hard she will throw us off like the fleas that we are. We have to protect the gifts that she gave us and see them as gifts, not as something to take and destroy. And that is why sometimes you meet our people and we live differently. Wanishi.
As difficult as COVID was for all of us, as with anything, when we look at the silver linings in our difficulties and our challenges, we can find them. And what COVID brought to the planet was the opportunity to stop and watch what would happen without humans. And what did we see? Mountain lions walking down town streets. Wild animals going through cities. Things that I never thought that I'd ever see, but I've read about in books. Within 100 years of no humans, New York City would just be a pile of rubble. The steel, the concrete would be gone. Vegetation would take back over. The birds, the animals would rule the roost again. And as we think about these stories and these words and what they mean and the gifts that COVID brought us, it's the opportunity to honor the feminine, to honor Mother Earth, and not take that for granted. Yes, it was a difficult time in so many ways for so many people, and I don't want to trivialize that or minimize it or marginalize anybody in that sense. But the gifts were that Mother Nature will be here after us. And if we want our children, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and the generations beyond, we need to start listening to each other, and we need to start speaking to the people that can help us, that make the decisions. And we need to listen to the plants and not be the animals. Next up, Bob Collins from the Center for the Inland Bays.
And I will talk a little bit about plants and animals. But my name is Bob Collins. I'm program manager for the Delaware Center for the Inland Bays. I'm Lisa's colleague. One of the series of projects I've been involved in is our living shorelines. And living shorelines are very simply using techniques that that nature would employ to stabilize shorelines. We all know about rock jetties. We all know about bulkheads. And in certain places where humans and the water interface, we're going to need those. But it's not the best solution in many cases. So what we're trying to do is to use nature, the plants, the animals actually too. In a lot of cases, whether it's oysters or ribbed mussels, to stabilize a shoreline. And what we're looking to do is to let nature protect the shoreline. One of the projects that we will be working on, and I'm not here to talk very much about it today, is the Thompson Island project over in Rehoboth Bay. And Thompson Island is a very important cultural spot for the Nanticoke tribe. You know, we look at the vegetation cover, we look at the amount of animals, particularly the shellfish that will colonize, and they'll help stabilize the soil there. It's kind of become the institutional thing is to put a bulkhead up or to put rock up there, and there are alternatives to it. You know, one of the things that we like to say is that hardscape never looks as good as the day you put it in, but these living shorelines, as they grow, as the vegetation fills in, and as the plants, the animals, as they come in, every day that goes by, it looks better, and it's growing with Mother Earth. So, with that, Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. I think of those things that you said, and I'm reminded of the masculine. Yeah, me move big rocks, stop water. Me pound up big boards, bulkhead. But the living shoreline. I've had the opportunity to write grants and receive grants from the Department of Agriculture and the Army Corps of Engineers and DENREC, and to install a living shoreline right in Fenwick here. And the beauty of it was that I got to see what returned as the earth backfilled the biologs, as the grasses started to grow into place, the plugs got bigger and bigger, the crabs came in, the minnows started swimming in and around the grasses. It was life. I think it was the first time I ever got to understand what bringing life into the world is, and not to minimize any of what that takes from the female perspective. I'm passive in that sense, but I know enough now that when I embrace the feminine, when I look towards bringing life and not destroying it, I feel better. I feel healthier. And I feel blessed when I can honor the sacredness of Mother Nature. And with that, let's hear from Ragghi Rain again.
No one's falling asleep yet, are they? Okay. This is one of my favorite lessons. It's really interesting because when you learn the lesson and you tell it over and over and over again, it takes root inside of you. And you live it. You live it. That's why it's important when we're teaching, you do it over and over again so it takes root. If you listen closely to this last story, you're going to hear culture in there too and have an understanding of our ways. There was a young man, and he was renowned as a hunter. And this young man had done the things he needed to do to prove that he was a young man. He had to first prove that he could care for his family, his extended family, and his community. Because that is the way of our people. And once he had proven those things, then he earned the privilege to have a wife. He was very excited. And so as he moved through his life and traveled through village to village, he met a young woman. He thought, And then he found out that she had proven that she was a woman and that she could care for her family, her extended family, and her community, because we are people of community and care for one another. The poorest of the poor is the wisest in our tribes, and they give from here and not worry. And so those two came together and they decided to join their lives. And it was good. And then he went to live with her in her village. That's our way. You go with the woman's family. And it was good. He met his relatives. He liked them. They were good people. And then he met his brother-in-law. They were about the same age. And they had similar interests, except for one thing his brother-in-law could not see. But the hunter knew that his brother was wise beyond his years. And so every evening they would talk and share. And one night his brother-in-law said, I always wanted to go hunting, but no one will take me. And I was thinking one day, if you would consider taking me hunting, I would appreciate it. The hunter, he puffed up. Yes, I am the finest hunter in all the lands. I will start teaching you tonight. So every night he taught him more and more. And finally comes the day when he said, tomorrow we go hunting. He was so excited. So he rose early in the morning, because that's when you go hunting. And they had everything they needed, and they headed off. And they went across the village and into the forest. And as they did, the hunter was talking, and all of a sudden his brother-in-law said, shh, do you hear that? And the hunter said, hear what? And there's a mountain lion pushing her cubs underneath the tall grasses. She's coming this way. Whew! there she was. She stood right in front of them and looked at him and took off. And the hunter thought, oh, my senses are keen, but his are keener. And then they continued to walk. And all of a sudden his brother-in-law said, "Do you hear that?" And he said, "No, what is it?" "It is a bird unfolding her wings." And overhead she flew. And the hunter thought, whoa, this happened all day. And at one point he said, "Do you smell that?" And the hunter said, "No, fresh water." "Oh yes, that is where we'll put our trap." So they moved that way. And he looked at his brother-in-law and said, "You set your trap here. I will travel to the other side and set my trap, but wait for me." And so that's what they did. And the hunter, he put his trap down and he covered it completely. You could not see it. He was good. And then he came over and he looked at his brother-in-law's trap. It was as plain as day. But the hunter was tired and he thought he's not going to catch anything anyway. So he said, "Let's go." So they headed home. So the next morning, earlier than the morning before, they rose, because we have this saying that we believe that once something has given its life to us, we respect it and we make sure that we are there so it does not suffer. And so they moved through. And this time, his brother-in-law was doing what a lot of people do. He was like, "Do you think I caught something? I hope I got something. Do you think I really got something? I am so excited. I've never been hunting before, but this would be so great if the first I meet." And the hunter said, "If we haven't caught anything, we won't catch anything because everybody knows we're coming. So hush." So his brother-in-law was like, "Okay, I'm not going to say anything, but I really hope I got something." And so they move and they come to that place. And the hunter goes to where his trap is, and he pushes it back, and there is a beautiful brown bird, and he takes from his side those sacred herbs, and he said, "Kishalamo, thank you for giving us this gift." And he gave Kisha the blessing, and then he bent down, and he gave him the sacred herbs, and he said, "Wanishi, for giving your life to our people." And then he picked it up and he carried it over and he walked over to his brother's trap and he knew nothing. And he looked down and was like, whoa, oh my goodness. And inside the trap was a bird that was so beautiful. It was though that bird had flown through the rainbow and it had covered all its feathers and 1,000 colors. And the hunter looked down and thought, my wife would love that bird. She would love those feathers. There is so much she would do with them. But my brother-in-law's wife would love that bird's feathers too. And he was thinking back and forth, and he knew the right thing to do. Do you? And so together they spoke the words to Kishalamo of thanks. Together they gave thanks for the bird. And then he took that bird out. He walked over to his brother-in-law and said, "You have caught something." And he placed that brown bird in his brother-in-law's hands. And then they put them in their pouch and they walked. And as they walked, the red star watches over us and knew what to do. Sent the heat down until they were so hot. And the hunter said, "Let's rest. Let's share water together." Nip, and they did. And while they were sitting there, the hunter looked at his brother-in-law. He said, you know so much. I have always wondered this. Why do men fight? And why do they war against one another? And his brother-in-law looked at him into his eyes as though he could see straight to his spirit in the center of his being. And he said, men fight and men war because they do to one another what you did to me back there. And the hunter knew not what to say. He knew not what to do, but his head hung in shame. And after a while, he lifted that beautiful colored bird out of his pouch and he handed it to his brother-in-law. And his brother-in-law gave him back the brown bird. And they still sat. And the hunter said, my brother-in-law, once men have fought and once men have war, can they ever come back together again? And he looked into his eyes as though he could see and into the center of his being. And he said, once they have fought and once they have war, they can come back together only when they have made the wrong right again. For many tribal people, there is no words for sorry. You must make the wrong right again. So much wrong has been done, and so much fighting and warring. But it is not until you work and make it right again. Our belief is different than many others who say, I'm sorry. So when we make the right, we see it differently. How many of us are willing to do the work to make it right? It's work, but it is so worth it so that the future generations will not have to struggle to make the wrongs right. Let us do the work so our children don't.
What will it take as each one of us goes out of here today? What will it take to make the wrongs right? We listen. We listen to the pain. We listen to the struggles. We listen to our hearts. We open our hearts. We all have our own pains. But the rights are worth it. So as we go out today, I ask each of us to do this, to think about, how can I listen? When I hear something that's making my heart start to go, ooh, I should start speaking, I should start arguing, but what about my point? My point of view is not necessarily what's important in the moment. It's just being open. It's listening and realizing that all the rights that have ever been done can be corrected. And we start today. And we find that alignment with each other and with our communities. And we don't back down from confrontation or from people telling us how things need to be done. We can stop. We can listen. doesn't take much. It just takes willingness. Willingness to be open that there's beauty in every situation that we face. And as long as we do that, we will find a grace within us that we didn't think possible. And so, I thank everybody for joining us today. This may be a little off of photography, but it's the journey. It's the journey of a heart saying, hey, I am willing to listen. I want to be a part of making wrongs right. I want to be a part of a living shoreline. I want to be a part of water that is refreshing and nourishing. And I want to be a part of a better world and planet. And so we came here today with the initial benefit of donating this piece, the piece next to Carol over there, which is, I believe, a wood duck in the fog right off the coast, right off the living shoreline at the Botanic Gardens. And there's two other pieces that, well, that's just the way things go, right? They're still sitting in UPS, hopefully across the street at Warren's. Oh, they've arrived. But as is life, things are imperfect. And it didn't matter that the pieces didn't arrive. What mattered was each one of you being here and hearing the beautiful message from Ragghi. Wanishi, thank you. You've brought forth something inside me that I've always known has existed. And thanks to you, thanks to Kendall, and thanks to a number of other people that have helped me work with finding my alignment in my heart, I know that there is a path forward. I know that we can correct the wrongs. And we can change everything that we need to. We just have to forgive. We have to listen. And we have to, I believe, be simple in our decisions. If we think about, how is this going to impact the air that I breathe? How's this going to impact the water that I drink? How's this impact my natural environment around me? It becomes kind of difficult to make our decisions. And I have to be succinct with my words. But I don't believe that there's a challenge that we face that we can't correct. It may take 50 years to rein in oil, and it will never go away. But as something in the room, whatever, everything can be fixed. People can have their capital returned to them. They can still hunt, they can still fish, they can still provide for their families. If we could listen and be a part of the bigger equation to that end. What I am doing, besides donating the pieces to the center, for the next 2 weeks, everything that I sell through my website, rchrisclark.com, I am donating to Indigenous wisdom. I don't know what that looks like yet. But this is me trying to right wrongs that I may not have created. But I bear it on my shoulders from my predecessors. And I don't know I don't know where I'm going. But I know the direction that I want to go, and that's in the right direction. So thank you, Ragghi. Bonnie Hall, thank you for being the inspiration that has brought all of this together. Thank you, Lisa, Bob, Melanie, and each one of you. Thank you for being here today and being a part of this. This is awesome.